I'd like to have you utilize now the violet transmuting flame. It must be realized by all that no man at any time, except he's sleeping, ceases to create if he does nothing more than sit with his mind disengaged even from a sense of reality. He is marking time or boring himself without concentrating constructively on anything. People do this. They radiate boredom into the universe. For example, we see thousands of school children, millions of them, all over the world. They're thinking that now vacation comes. They hear the hum of the bees, they see the streams of water, and they want to roam the hills, and they are through with their lessons for the year in their consciousness. So their mind lazily drifts out the window, and they are no longer thinking of anything except daydreaming and wandering in the streams of willy-nilly thought. No particular thought, just anything, whatever notion comes to them. Somehow or other, people do not realize that they have the stream of God's energy pouring down on the top of their head every minute, even when you're sleeping. Otherwise, your heart would stop. And so this energy of idleness and daydreaming becomes also an activity which is purposeless. It has no purpose. But it consumes energy, and it becomes like a fly trap. It catches other people in its nets, and they too begin to put their mind in what we have called idle gear. It's like putting your car in neutral. The motor's running, but you're going no place. And so this, of course, may at times be necessary when the mind becomes extremely fatigued, as one is falling asleep. But it is not necessary to indulge in reverie constantly. And it is a dangerous thing, which many times removes the divine prerogative from our consciousness. We do not exercise our authority over our consciousness. This is the difference between the masters of wisdom and those individuals who allow themselves to be the victims of life. They are the victims of mass thoughts, of mass entities, of mass demons. And they do not understand the disciplines that are utterly necessary in the retreats of the brotherhood in order to achieve. Achievement is the natural estate of man. And man can, if he will, assume authority over his world and over himself. Let us then, recognizing this, understand the role that is played by the violet transmuting flame, which was released by God as the highest aspect of light. As we all know, if we take a prism in our hand and we allow this prism to reflect the light of the sun upon a screen, it will break the white light down into the primary colors, and we see the rainbow spectrum on the screen. The highest color that can be seen is the violet, is it not? And that is comparable to the number 9 in one sense of the word. Because it is the highest, as 9 is the highest numerical aspect. So we see that with the manifestation of the violet, what is it we are doing? We are preparing to start over. In other words, we're going to go back now from the violet to the next step in the spectrum of color or vibration. The same with the numerical system. When we come to the number 9, we prepare to skip to 10. When we come to the number 19, we prepare to skip to 20. And the same ad infinitum through the whole numerical system as far as we can go. So we have to understand that the action of the violet color is comparable to Lord Siva in the Vishnu Siva panoply. In other words, it is comparable to the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is a whirlwind action of God. The fan is in his hand, the Bible says, and he shall thoroughly purge his floor. Who amongst us dares to say that we require no purification? Who amongst us dares to say that we are masters of our world? Then we should not be here. We should not be in this world at all, for there are many better places than this world that exist, and we ought to be there, because by our achievement, we would have readied ourselves for those conditions. The very fact that we are here indicates that either we are to be placed in the role of teacher, or, if not teacher, then certainly pupil. One of the two. And so in one sense, we're all pupils and all teachers at the same time. So the violet ray, or the violet transmuting flame, which is one of the aspects of God, comparable to the action of Lord Siva, comparable to the action of the Holy Spirit, is the alchemical action that precedes transformation. In other words, today we have a formation. We have certain atomic structures and substructures in our world, in our thought process, the blockings of individual ideation or identity. These blockings, which are geometrical in form, like the dodecahedron and all of these forms, the tetrahedron, all these different forms, are actually merely manifestations that duplicate and reduplicate and arrange themselves according to some composite pattern. When we understand then that man is involved in all of this, but it is constantly in a state of flux or change, we realize that change can be either the change of notion, N-O-T-I-O-N, just notion, or it can be what we call the directed change. Most individuals today who are at all interested in understanding themselves realize and recognize that they have to give some sense of direction to the powers that be. Let us supposing right now that God handed to us Aladdin's magic lamp. And he said, rub the lamp and the genie will appear, and then tell the genie what to do. And the genie will do it. Well, wouldn't you be required to tell the genie what to do? Or would you just say to the genie, do whatever you want to? Of course not. There must be a conscious direction of the individual life of man. He must know, and therefore Christ pointed out, that we should ask God to teach us what things we should pray for. Do you understand? We need to actually know what we ought to have. And I have found great value in this. I was amazed one time to find out how little I really knew about what I ought to pray for. This was part of my own training. I said, well, I ought to pray for good health. Yes, that sounded all right. I ought to pray for supply so that I could be able to do God's will to a greater extent. Yes, that's good. And then when you come to the point of achieving spiritually, that's the rub. Very few people really understand what specific things they ought to ask for. It's really strange having all this power and still not knowing just how to use it. And so, a very important part of the violet transmuting flame action is to clear from our world all these notions and all this idleness of mind, and call to God inwardly, or make a determination that we are going to be vested or clothed upon with the garment of understanding. One of the great prophets of old, back in the Old Testament, tells us that with all thy getting, get understanding. And he didn't say that just because it wasn't important. He said it because it was important. You would be absolutely amazed, as in the story of the 3 wishes, where this lady was given 3 wishes. And so she was told that any one of these 3 wishes she could have. So the first thing she wished for was $1 million, or 1,000,000 cedis to you. And almost immediately they came from the mill where her husband worked to tell her that he had had a terrible accident and had been killed, and that the insurance policy that he carried was coming due and she would receive $1 million or cedis or whatever you want to call it. So she had one of her 3 wishes fulfilled. Then the woman, of course, knew she had 2 more. And so the first thing she thought of was, what a terrible tragedy has befallen my family. So she wished her husband alive again, taking up the second wish. And so, almost within the hour, she heard his footsteps as he was coming across the porch toward the door. And immediately she used up the 3rd wish and wished him back in his grave. She was frightened. And so we see that man's spirit of not really knowing what to ask for is really very, very important. We might give a great deal of thought to this. Not that we try to solve it by thought, but solve it by prayer, by intercession, and by the recognition of what is important. And I don't think it really is going to be too hard, because in reality you can start with your family situations. You can take a piece of paper and write some of your problems down, and then watch how one by one they can disappear. They can disappear because you are bringing to bear upon it the crux, the meeting of the mind of God, the power of the Holy Spirit with your consciousness. There must be a conscious blending. This is what is meant by matrix. 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 You understand? The power of the cross of life, bringing God into the crucible of your affairs, and using God as he intended to be used. As my wife said this morning, as is in the book, command ye me. Learn to command the powers of the universe. Don't be a puppet blown by every wind. Learn to command yourself. If you don't, you are dispersing the talents or the talent, whichever the case may be, that God has given you. And needlessly. That's why we are here today, is because we failed in the past to apprehend all that we are. We need not fail. There is no reason for it whatsoever. I really think sometimes that when people are very, very far behind, when they are way down in the dregs, that they seem to get more deliverance because it looks like more deliverance, because it's more self-evident. But the closer you get to God, until you come to the point where your problems are not all material, but they begin to be spiritual. In other words, you have certain spiritual problems you're solving, and these problems must be solved. These are what we call the refining process. When you come into the point where you are refining yourself, fitting yourself for true high spiritual office, then watch out, because that is the real problem area. I want to mention in passing, and a word to the wise will be sufficient, that many people wonder why when they start out upon the path that they have problems, and why when they get further still upon the path they have even more problems. I want to point out to you that the human race as a whole is a very large group of people. I want to point out to you that among this very large group of people, some fail spiritually. People fail in every generation. They take vows of holy orders upon them and fail. They start out with God and worshiping God, and they go back into the utter ignorance and superstitions from whence they came. In other words, as the apostle says, the dog is turned to his own vomit again. This often happens, that people do these things. Sometimes they never come back to the light, as far as for practical purposes. Sometimes people reach the point where they're almost masters, and then they take the left-handed path instead of the right-handed path. Do you see the point? They become black magicians or something like that, and they want human power and mastery over others rather than mastery over themselves. When this happens and they have marked their failure, it is marked in the Akashic records. When it is marked in the Akashic records, it is then a mark on the ethers. But they become a part of what we call the brothers of the shadow. And when they see you, any one of you, the little disciple of the Master, beginning to succeed, what is the first thought that comes to them? I will stop them. That's their thought. They don't want you to succeed where they fail. Does that make any sense to you? And these are beings in the astral realm, in the psychic realm. These are beings that have lost, in many cases, their even physical body. They have lost, in a sense, their real identity. And they're a part of what we call the powers of darkness, which really has no power. But still it has power where human effectivity is involved, where people give it power, in other words. They empower it. And so these forces then stand to try to hinder the aspirant to light. When you go on the spiritual path, you are going to encounter these brothers of the shadow. And you know when you get the biggest attack from them? When you come to the point where you are truly about to realize God. Does that make sense? When you are very, very close to your God realization, that is when they will work to try to hinder you the most. And oh yes, they will work in many strange and mysterious ways. Sometimes they work through fatigue, then again they work through boredom, then again they work through distraction. And of course, the most clever tool of all is the tool of discouragement. The devil is supposed to carry a little satchel. Of course, we're not speaking of the literal aspect thereof, but we're thinking entirely of the symbolical stature. In other words, he's supposed to carry a little satchel, and he has one very sharp tool, and that sharp tool, people ask, what is that tool? He says, that's discouragement. Because when they fail to get us through any other means, they will use that tool, the tool of discouragement. Sometimes they use it at the very precise moment when people are about to achieve. I learned this a long time ago. We've traveled around a great deal all over the world. We've encountered all types of people. And we realize that one does not pin their faith in the outer manifestation, but in the responses of human hearts. And that is how God works. So when we use the violet transmuting flame today, I want you to understand that it has the tendency of boiling up through the consciousness. So let us now utilize the violet transmuting flame in order to free ourselves from what may be termed the attic or basement debris of our consciousness. You know, you can have debris in your basement, but you can also have it in your attic. How is that? Quite simply, in the basement, this is where the low order of human thoughts materialize. In other words, suspicion is one of these. If I look at my friend, or I look at the stranger, or whoever I look at, and I decide perhaps he has a bad motive, I may be suspicious of everything that he does. So as I am suspicious of what he's doing, I begin to deal with the basement side of life. And there are so many thoughts besides that. There are all types of thoughts that are human, that are involved with the basement side of life, and the debris that is in the basement. But some people have the idea that when we come to the attic of life, which is the side where we aspire to something higher, that then we're free of all of that. Not so when you're in the human. Because the great masters one time told me, they said, you cannot help it if a bird lands on your head, but you do not need to let him build a nest in your hair. Do you understand that? I mean, quite simple. All people practically at one time or another become victims of mass thoughts. The thoughts of the people, you see, flood into their consciousness. Unwanted thoughts, undesirable thoughts. You say to yourself, what a terrible thing that I thought this. Don't be alarmed. the bird is landing on your head. You don't want him, so you kick him out and tell him to fly away. Go about his business. Because your thoughts are going to be orderly thoughts. Thoughts of brotherhood, of decency, and of the mastery of yourself. This is the difference between a master and a slave consciousness. The world is full of slaves, and they all think they're masters because they master their ego. You understand? In other words, because they can try to impress someone with their own importance. But in reality, the greatest gift that any man can have is a gift of simple honesty, directness, love. That's what a little child means. And Christ said, if you don't receive the kingdom of heaven or the kingdom of God as a little child, you shall in no way enter in. You think about that. So we're going to use a violet flame right now, and we're going to use it this way. I am a being of violet fire, followed by, I am the purity God desires. You see the point? I am a being of violet fire. I am the purity God desires. Now, when you give this decree, in order to attune with the masters, it is desirable that you concentrate upon the color of violet, similar to that which you see here in my shirt, although that's not a perfect example of it. A better example is to be found in the chart surrounding the lower figure in the chart. It's a pale yet vibrant color of violet. You concentrate upon that color, and you think of the color in the background of your mind all the time you're saying the decree. And then you intensify the power of your thought. This does not have to mean that you are stepping up the volume of necessity. Let the volume step up because it's automatic. Don't try to force it or compel it. This is one point I want to make to your group. Volume alone may become coarse if it is not accompanied by the mastery of the angelic hosts. Angels do exist. And so we want you to use this violet transmuting flame together now. And we will say it quite a while, because I will give you an example of the chants that are used, for example, in India, some of the mantrams, like Om Triambakam Yejamahe Sugandhim Pushtivaranam Urvarukamiva Bandhanant Mrityor Mokshya Mamritat Om Triambakam Yejamahe Sugandhim Pushtivaranam Urvarukamiva bandhanant mrityor mokshya mamritat. You see. Now, this time, instead of using that mantra, we're going to use I am. And when we say I am, we're going to feel that we are. And why are we? Because the Spirit of God is. Knock down all the people in the world until they're all out of this world, and God would still be here. The wind would still blow through the trees. Life would still go on in the nature world, but man would be absent. So what is it that endures forever, that is unmoved, like the giant redwoods of California or the cedars of Lebanon? What is it? It is the Spirit of God that remains presiding over all nature. And we in our spirits may remain thus also, for we are a spirit as God is. And through the purification of our spirits and the development of the Christ consciousness, we come into the similitude of God once again. And this is man's natural God estate. So we will chant this, I am, and feel when you say I am that you are. Not that you're here today in 1972. But you've been here back in the year 1000, the year 4000, 5000 BC. It doesn't matter. go back 1,000,000 years. You have always been here. That's what's chanting. Not this temporal personality, but the living truth. So let us do this together. Please separate hands and feet. There's a purpose behind this. I can explain it later. And you may hold the palms of your hands upward, resting lightly in your lap. You will not need your books for this. Together. I am a being of violet fire. I am the purity God desires. I am a being of violet fire. I am the purity God desires. I am a being of violet fire. I am the purity God desires. I am a being of violet fire. I am the purity God desires. I am a being of violet fire. I am the purity God desires. I am a being of violet fire. I am the purity God desires. I am a being of violet fire. I am the purity God desires. I am a being of violet fire. I am the purity God desires. I am a being of violet fire. I am the purity God desires. I am a being of violet fire. I am the purity God desires. I am a being of violet fire. I am the purity God desires. I am a being of violet fire. I am the purity God desires. I am a being of violet fire. I am the purity God desires. I am a being of violet fire. I am the purity God desires. I am a being of violet fire. I am the purity God desires. I am a being of violet fire. I am the purity God desires. I am a being of violet fire. I am the purity God desires. I am a being of violet fire. I am the purity God desires. I am a being of violet fire. I am the purity God desires. I am a being of violet fire. I am the purity God desires. I am a being of violet fire. I am the purity God desires. I am a being of violet fire. I am the purity God desires. I am a being of violet fire. I am the purity God desires. I am a being of violet fire. I am the purity God desires. I am a being of violet fire. I am the purity God desires. I am a being of violet fire. I am the purity God desires. I am a being of violet fire. I am the purity God desires. I am a being of violet fire. I am the purity God desires. I am a being of violet fire. I am the purity God desires. I am a being of violet fire. I am the purity God desires. I am a being of violet fire. I am the purity God desires. I am a being of violet fire. I am the purity God desires. I want you to take notice how the increase of the vibrational frequency has the tendency to act as a centrifuge to throw off the emotional whirl of human despair and to replace it by a vibrational aspect similar to negatively charged ions that can be recognized after a rain, after a storm. Because it gives a feeling of elan, of vibrancy, of buoyancy, of vitality, of awareness of God. This is always important in the meditational experience. Without it, individual man may feel very limited, being cast only in the mold of his outer intellect and the either successful or unsuccessful exploitation of the egos of others. We must recognize then that the authority for each life stream, for each individual, is his own beloved mighty I Am presence. We must recognize that it is the God in individual man that is able to enfold in him, to unfold his identity and the latent powers that are inherent within man. We read from time to time of extrasensory perception. We read of those individuals who are able to look at someone else and then at a glance to tell that one exactly what is acting in their world. Oh yes, there's a lot of people like that. People who have developed various psychic abilities. In the United States of America, there was recently released, in the past few years, a book entitled Psychic Discoveries, Behind the Iron Curtain. We realize then that not only does the United States, one of the industrial giants of the world, but the Soviet Union also recognize the existence of psychic powers latent in man. These latent powers in man are exactly that. Powers, but not necessarily mastery. It's like this. You may have the ability to play a piano, and your playing of the piano may be recognized by the whole world. But perhaps your repertoire, the pieces that you can play, are limited to the inspiration of others. If so, You are merely a mechanical genius. You have the power to reproduce, but not the power to create. It is the wish of the great masters of the Great White Brotherhood to engender in man that awareness of consciousness which will enable him to create at will. If you cannot create at will, if you are dependent always on others, you are not fulfilling the ancient prediction and prophecy, for the time will come when his teachers will no longer be removed into a corner, but he will see his teachers. And then men will not say to one another, "Know the Lord," for all shall know me, from the least unto the greatest, he has said. And every man will sit under his own vine and under his own fig tree. This means that as a part of the destiny of man, each individual will have achieved his own God realization. Let us try an ancient chant from the Far East then to show you how the decrees and mantra are, after a fashion, similar. This one we will use will be Om Namo Narayanaya. Some of you may have never heard it before. I will ask our own little rooting section that we brought with us, including my little son, 8 years old, if they will join me first as an example, and then we will invite you all to participate. This is a very valuable mantra, one which you may have on tape and use also. It goes like this. Om Namo Narayanaya, 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 Om Namo Narayanaya. Now, we'll say it for you. Om Namo Narayanaya. There are only 3 actual words to say. Those of you who are able may participate in this now. Together. Om Namo Narayanaya, 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 Narayanaya, Om Namo 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 Narayanaya. This form of chanting is also similar to the use of the decrees. It is called mantra, of course, and it has a valuable lesson to be learned in the sense that it is a magnetic approach to God. It creates the similitude of the vibration which has been chanted for thousands and thousands of years by God seekers. These God seekers, having used this, have also charged the constructive momentums of their own life into the vibrations of the mantra. Man's use of this mantra, then, is also a means of attracting to oneself magnetically those ecstatic experiences which are stable and which in the world community and in the personal individual mind will enable him to attune with the frequencies of those who have attained in the past. One thought that might be of interest to most of you, and yet it is easily discoverable, is the fact that Jesus Christ, when he was alive 2,000 years ago in the embodiment of Jesus, breathed just like you and I. He inhaled and he exhaled. And the same atoms of air that he inhaled and exhaled have no doubt many times been inhaled and exhaled by most of you. Stop and think about that. Is that not a tremendous thought? A tremendous power that we have had the same physical atoms of oxygen and the air elements in our bodies that the great masters have breathed in before. There is something very wonderful in the mastery of the earth, the air, and the fire, and the water. Because in the four lower bodies of man, we find these elements predominating. Let us take, for example, the physical body. The physical body equates with the earth. The body of air equates with the mind. The body of feeling or emotions equates with the water. And the power of man's memory, by which he integrates the whole, equates with the fire. Have you ever stopped to think of the role of memory? Memory, mind you. Memory as the deciding, integrating factor of your whole life. What would you be if you did not have a memory of your identity? A memory of your fellow men, their countenance, their expressions, their life. In fact, a memory of language and language skills, a memory of science, a memory of even the stars if you are an astronomer. Memory is very important to integrate the whole. There is an automatic memory in the physical body which we call the subconscious. And there is a collective subconscious of the world. All men today feed into the collective subconscious that which amounts to the sewer of their thoughts. But don't forget, while they are down here, thinking in the human level, their God self is also hallowing space by pouring into space those lofty thoughts which will draw us upward. This shows the statement of Omar Khayyam made long ago where he said, "I sent my soul through the invisible to spell some word of the hereafter, and by my soul returned to me and said, I myself am heaven and hell." We are able to see in this statement man's potential for greatness or smallness of soul and of consciousness. Who is the man that frees the world if he is not the one who can say, "Our Father," rather than "my Father"? For in the lofty sentiment of "our," we eradicate the mere concept of me, mine, and so forth, which is quite vital. Because in the unity of the soul of one man with God is the unity of the soul of all men with God. Christ was born 2,000 years ago in a manger. But today, Christ is still unborn in many hearts. It is not enough to submit oneself to some form of religion, but one must of necessity open the gates of the heart unto God, and although no one may know that we do it, we may do it, and He will know, and He will answer, and He will commune with that child mind which is not too simple to receive Him in the temple of manifestation, knowing that when the babe of Christ appears in the consciousness, that babe will grow up. That babe will become the child man. And then the 33 years symbolical of the Christ will also manifest as by the power of the 3 times 3, man fulfills all his requirements for circumnavigating the divine triad, the cosmic triangle, which may be spelt T-R-Y, triangle. We are all in the midst of trial. Self-trial, the trials of the masters, the tests of the world, and the tests that in the final analyses will determine whether or not we are worthy to be the ongoing Son of God, that when hung upon the cross of human crucifixion, when left to stand alone in the final test to determine whether or not that soul has ultimately made its commitment, that individual can, in the dark night of the soul as depicted by St. John of the Cross, speak forth, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" Because that individual will understand and feel that tremendous passion when God seems to flee the temple and be there no more. For all of man's lifetimes, for all of his life, he has always had God there. The comforting presence of the Father, Mother, God. Now, the Lord suddenly flees the temple. And the child man, grown up hopefully into the spiritual attainment of his mastery, will be able to take dominion as Christ did at that moment and stand against the whole world and all the challenges of the universe and say, "Lo, I am." Because he will be. It is one thing to perceive the flame out of the burning bush, and the bush is not consumed. But it is another thing, as St. Paul says, to pass through the trial by fire, when man's works will be tested. And so we must always bear in mind that we build not for one moment, but we build eternally. And this is the great problem of man today. We heard of a lady in the state of Texas just a few weeks ago who thought she was about to die. So what did she do? She sent to town to get a group of newspaper people to come out because she was quite famous. And they came and they wrote her obituary with her. She sat up in bed, propped up on silken pillows, and they wrote her obituary. Then she sent for a great photographer. She got out her paint, her lipstick, and all the things that were calculated to make her look well. She put them on, and she had her picture taken and prepared to die. Vanity, vanity, vanity. All is vanity. We can live forever, but the ego must pass away. This does not mean the end of man. Many years ago, in my meditations, there came to me a thought. And it was the same thought that Christ thought. And as the shepherd boy David, he also had these same thoughts. Thou wilt not leave my soul in hell, nor suffer thine Holy One to see corruption. In my moment of meditation, I was thinking, and I said to myself, what man has done? Look at all these things that man has accomplished. These fast automobiles, aeroplanes, television sets, computers, tremendous new advances in the field of medicine, even in the field of cataracts. We've heard now of a most tremendous accomplishment which has been now in existence for some time in our country. Whereas years ago they used to operate to cut out cataracts from the eyes of the aged. Now they merely put what amounts to a steel drinking straw against the eye and they suck up the membrane. And the person is able to see the same day without pads or bandages over their eyes. We thought of all these advances, the different advances that mankind has made in the field of science. And then we begin to think of the tremendous activities of our whole neurological system, of our whole physiological system, of our whole mental system, and our spiritual side, all of that. And then we said, we can echo the sentiments of the Christ. Surely God did not create anyone. I said anyone, in order that that person should be interred and be no more. God created man to have a matrix of perfection. But man individually has failed to perceive it. And because he has failed to perceive it, he has failed to manifest it. For without the power of vision, the people perish. The people fall into the image that perishes because they don't perceive the image that lives. It's really very, very simple. But only a child can discover it. And it was the part of my faith in God and His great advancement that discovered it, not my human intelligence. Because I perceive behind the screen of intelligence the eternal values and motivations. These motivations are one with all that lives immortally. As the Bhagavad Gita said, never the spirit was born, the spirit shall cease to be never, dead though the house of it seems. Awareness then must come to us of the meaning and definition of life. For through our creation and recreation of these matrices in thought and feeling, we are able to once again be one with God. And through unity with God, nothing is impossible unto us. If we seek to do it by human strivings, we will always find that human strivings may carry us a certain distance, but that distance will be a distance of limitation, because man has limitations. But if we tether ourselves to a star, and I'm not speaking of an astronomical star, but a spiritual one, then as the star rises in hopes, so will we also rise. That is the difference. And so we are going to use the power of our decrees again. This time I would like to see you build up an ocean. I would like to see you build up an ocean about 100 feet high around the whole world of violet transmuting fire, and have it come from the continent of Africa. And by the way, we've sent it over here many times to help in your problems. And we'd like to have you send it around the world from the east to the west. As lightning cometh from the east and goeth unto the west, so let the coming of the light of God, or the Son of Man, the radiance of man, be. Because this is the Christ consciousness and awareness of us all. We'll start it out, number 5.02. 5.02. Together. Lovely God, presence I am in me. Hear me now, I do decree. Bring to pass each blessing for which I call upon the Holy Christ self of each and all. Let violet fire of freedom roll round the world to make all whole. Saturate the earth and his people too, with increasing Christ radiance shining through. I am this action from God above, sustained by the hand of heaven's love, transmitting the causes of discord here, removing the cause so that none do fear. I am the full power of freedom's love, raising all earth to heaven above. Violet fire now blazing bright in living beauty is God's own light, which right now and forever sets the world, myself, and all life eternally free in ascended master perfection. Almighty I am, almighty I am, almighty I am. Lovely God, presence I am in me. Hear me now, I do decree. Bring to pass each blessing for which I call upon the Holy Christ self of each and all. Let violet fire of freedom roll round the world to make all whole. Saturate the earth and his people too, with increased Christ radiance shining through. I am this action from God above, sustained by the hand of heaven's love, transmitting the cause of discord here, removing the cause so that none do fear. I am the full power of violet fire now blazing bright in living beauty is God's own light, which right now and forever sets the world, myself, and all life eternally free in ascended master perfection. Almighty I am, almighty I am, almighty I am. Lovely God, presence I am in me. Hear me now, I do decree. Bring to pass each blessing for which I call upon the Holy Christ self of each and all. Let violet fire of freedom roll round the world to make all whole. Saturate the earth and his people too, with increasing Christ radiance shining through. I am this action from God above, sustained by the hand of heaven's love. Transmute the causes of discord here, removing the cause so that none do fear. I am the full power of freedom's love, raising all earth to heaven above. Violet fire now blazing bright in living beauty is God's own light, which right now and forever sets the world, myself, and all life eternally free in ascended master perfection. Almighty I am, almighty I am, almighty I am. Lord God, presence I am in me. Hear me now, I do decree. Bring to pass each blessing for which I call upon the Holy Christ self of each and all. Let violet fire of freedom roll round the world to make all whole. Saturate the earth and his people too, with increased Christ radiance shining through. I am this action from God above, sustained by the hand of heaven's love. Transmitting the causes of discord here, removing the cause so that none do fear. I am the full power of freedom's love, raising all earth to heaven above. Violet fire now blazing bright in living beauty is God's own light, which right now and forever sets the world, myself, and all life eternally free in ascended master perfection. Almighty I am, almighty I am, almighty I am. Lord God, presence I am in me. Hear me now, I do decree. Bring to pass each blessing for which I call upon the Holy Christ self of each and all. Let violet fire of freedom roll round the world to make all whole. Saturate the earth and its people too with increased Christ radiance shining through. I am this act from God above, sustained by the hand of heaven's love. Grant me the cause of discord here, removing the cause of undue fear. I am the full power of freedom's love, raising all earth to heaven above. Violet fire now blazing bright in living beauty is God's own light, which right now and forever sets the world, myself, and all life, eternally free and ascended master perfection. Almighty I am, almighty I am, almighty I am. They wanted you to whirl the merry-go-round real fast because, you see, in everybody all around the whole world, there are many wedges of darkened human substance, the vibrations of negativity, of fear, of doubt, of distrust, of greed, of all types of negative emotions that are little tiny dark wedges of substance in between the atoms of man's physical body. These are the causes of disease, and we can take disease and interpret it as dis-ease, or an absence of ease and comfort. Now, what is the real reason that humanity today are not able to let the divine Tao, or the divine energy, or the divine flame, or the spirit pass through their consciousness? Why is it that people fail to accept all of this? And what is it that keeps us from the acceptance of the power of the angels and the control of the elements and the mastery of ourselves? It is nothing else at all except human density. Human density. It is brought about because our furnaces are clogged with clinkers. You know what that means? We didn't have a clean burning flame. The flame is sooted with human doubts and fears. All these negativities. And the sooting eventually, as we keep burning the flame of life, creates the clinkers through which the draft of the Holy Spirit cannot come. And therefore, we have a system that is literally clogged with negative energy. And so people seek to explain this by material means. You know, they say, oh well, this is what has happened. And speaking from a human standpoint, let's examine it for a moment. Mankind starts out at a very early age with a completely beautiful arterial system in his cardiovascular system. The blood vessels of the body are all nice and open like the great culverts when you install a new sewage system. Our pipelines are all open. And so everything works very good when we are children. We see the sunshine in a blue sky. We watch the wind scampering merrily through the trees. And we are blithe and gay spirits in most cases. Life does not present serious problems to us. We do not know about economic difficulties and social difficulties. We are not aware of the implications of dogma and the incrustations of human questionings and records of death. We don't think of that. The baby is in the lap of its mother, and the baby feels immortal life because it has no awareness that it will ever die. So it's completely happy. Okay? Now what comes along? They tell us that at the age of 9 and 17 that atherosclerosis has already set in man's physical body. And this is because of the intake of food. Today there is no regard in the marketplaces for human beings, by human beings. Human beings do not regard it at all. They sell you, for example, French fried potatoes that are saturated with saturated fatty acids. Not unsaturated fatty acids, but saturated fatty acids. These are heated to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. When we eat them, what happens to our body? The body system, the digestive system, through its enzymes and the action of the physical various pancreatic juices, the juices from our liver and so forth, they all begin to work and churn in the stomach, creating the chyme which goes into our intestinal pattern. There, of course, it is assimilated through the arterial network by the proximity of that network to the lining of the bowel as peristalsis is taking place. And so, what is happening all the time to this saturated fatty acids? Shall I tell you? Well, of course, they are being deposited in your arterial system. And so the aging process that goes on all the time in people is accelerated because of the unsaturated fatty acids. And we hear more and more of people in their 30s dying of heart attacks. And the Bible speaks of it. It says, and the hearts of men are failing them for fear. And why is it? Because the solar plexus in man, that superb network of light, which is located right near the navel of man, this is impinged upon by vibrations of fear and doubt and man's inhumanity to man. When we were recently in the Hawaiian Islands, we were able to perceive spiritually the records of the ancient Hawaiian chiefs and some of their tortures. Did you realize that they submitted their own people to terrible, hideous forms of torture? And I am sorry to say that this has also happened here in Africa and also in America. In fact, I know no place where man's inhumanity to man has not been apparent. These records then, remaining as old momentums of negativity, must be destroyed. They are best destroyed by those who created them or by those who recognize that they have been created and that they are a negative concentration of energy, a negative snowball going down the human mountain of despair. And these negative energies must be eradicated, and no other way is as effective as these decrees in the violet flame, do you see? This is the most marvelous system, which Christ certainly brought forth in his recognition of the chalice of the grape, saying, I will not drink of this fruit of the vine until I drink it new in my kingdom. And we are doing that today because it is not just a matter of assimilating the physical body and blood of Christ in a Eucharistic sense. For the true Eucharist is the absorption of the principles of Christ's reality. When we are able to recognize this, we will void all man's inhumanity to man. And people will understand that everything that they do is done to themselves. Do you see what I mean? This is a very important point. If no one does anything, creates no harms at all to anyone else, then no one will suffer harms. Does that make sense? It seems to make great sense to me. And yet all over the world we are perceiving more and more of man's inhumanity to man cloaked in what we may call a soft glove. A mailed fist is always apparent in the world. But now we cover the mailed fist with a soft glove. The veneer of society that still practices great cruelty upon one another, depriving mankind of economic reality, of economic equality in the world. And yet, we must, of course, be extremely careful of this because there is a law of karma involved. And the law of karma clearly states that man shall receive whatever he sends out. If we send out to our neighbor darkness and despair will return to us. But if we send out the labor of love and light and beauty and instruction, then this will return to us also. And as we amplify in our society those constructive Christ elements that will strengthen the bonds of mankind, we will usher in the kingdom of heaven. Now we legislate our laws. Then they will come from the heart. Now we make rules and enforce them by police action of necessity. Then they will be administered because we will love one another enough not to violate those sacred principles which make our lives worthwhile. As Longfellow said, we can make our lives sublime. Do you understand? We can. And this is also God's will. So, we're going to take the 6 mighty cosmic light calls on 5.00, which will be used, I think, tonight in our service, where we have the Master Kuthumi speak. I will ask all of you to stand for this, because this is offered unto Saint Germain, who works with Jesus, Gautama Buddha, and many of the masters of the Great White Brotherhood in the behind-the-scenes action of developing a new body of God upon earth, a greater awareness, a reawakening. Let's say this together. Unfailing light of God, I am calling your perfection into action in me now. Unfailing light of God, I am calling your perfection into action in me now. Unfailing light of God, I am calling your perfection into action in me now. Unfailing light of God, I am calling your perfection into action in this organization now. Unfailing light of God, I am calling your perfection into action in this organization now. Unfailing light of God, I am calling your perfection into action in this organization now. Unfailing light of God, I am calling your perfection into action on the earth now. Unfailing light of God, I am calling your perfection into action on the earth now. Unfailing light of God, I am calling your perfection into action on the earth now. The blazing light of God in the fullness of its power is victorious now. The blazing light of God in the fullness of its power is victorious now. The blazing light of God in the fullness of its power is victorious now. Mighty Arcturus, thou Elum of God, descend with that light of 1,000 suns to transmute all human selfishness and discord on the earth now. Mighty Arcturus, thou Elum of God, descend with that light of 1,000 suns to transmute all human selfishness and discord on the earth now. Mighty Arcturus, thou Elum of God, descend with that light of 1,000 suns to transmute all human selfishness and discord on the earth now. The light of God never fails, and the beloved mighty I Am presence is that light. The light of God never fails, and the beloved mighty I Am presence is that light. The light of God never fails, and the beloved mighty I Am presence is that light. We speak to all misqualified energy. You have no power. Your day is done. In God's name I am. Be thou dissolved and transmuted into light, illumination, and love forever. We speak to all misqualified energy. You have no power. Your day is done. In God's name I am. Be thou dissolved and transmuted into light, illumination, and love forever. We speak to all misqualified energy. You have no power. Your day is done. In God's name I am. Be thou dissolved and transmuted into light, illumination, and love forever. The unlimited hosts of light now move with lightning speed around the whole world, and all human shadows melt away before God's love. The unlimited hosts of light now move with lightning speed around the whole world, and all human shadows melt away before God's love. The unlimited hosts of light now move with lightning speed around the whole world, and all human shadows melt away before God's love. Now, while you're still on your feet, let's take the next one, 501. Mighty cosmic light, my own I Am presence bright, proclaim freedom everywhere in order and by God control. I am making all things whole. Mighty cosmic light, stop the lawless hordes of night, proclaim freedom everywhere in justice and in service true. I am coming, God, to you. Mighty cosmic light, I am law's prevailing might, proclaim freedom everywhere, magnifying all goodwill. I am freedom living still. Mighty cosmic light, now make all things right, proclaim freedom everywhere. In love's victory all shall go. I am the wisdom all shall know. I am freedom's holy light, never more despairing. I am freedom's holy light. Evermore I'm sharing. Freedom, freedom, freedom. Expand, expand, expand. I am. Forevermore I am freedom. Mighty cosmic light, my own I am presence bright. Proclaim freedom everywhere, in order and by God control. I am making all things whole. Mighty cosmic light, stop the lawless hordes of night. Proclaim freedom everywhere, in justice and in service true. I am coming, God, to you. Mighty cosmic light, I am law's prevailing might. Proclaim freedom everywhere, in magnifying all goodwill. I am freedom living still. Mighty cosmic light, now make all things right. Proclaim freedom everywhere, in love's victory all shall go. I am the wisdom all shall know. I am freedom's holy light, never more despairing. I am freedom's holy light, evermore I'm sharing. Freedom, 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 expand, expand, expand. I am, forevermore I am freedom. Mighty cosmic light, my own I am presence bright. Proclaim freedom everywhere, in order and by God control. I am making all things whole. Mighty cosmic light, stop the lawless hordes of night. Proclaim freedom everywhere, in justice and in service true. I am coming, God, to you. Mighty cosmic light, I am law's prevailing might. Proclaim freedom everywhere, magnifying all goodwill. I am freedom living still. Mighty cosmic light, now make all things right. Proclaim freedom everywhere, in love's victory all shall go. I am the wisdom all shall know. I am freedom's holy light, nevermore despairing. I am freedom's holy light, evermore I'm sharing. Freedom, freedom, freedom. Expand, expand, expand. I am. Forevermore I am freedom. Isn't that beautiful? The momentum, you see, of the heavenly hosts brought to us here. And in Ghana, where your motto of freedom and justice certainly proclaims what we, who are servants of the Great White Brotherhood, have always proclaimed to mankind. It is not as though we owned it. We all own it together. It is not our exclusivity except through our togetherness, and the world's togetherness, not in mere physical union, but in a spiritual unity of hearts. This is best resolved in the practical aspects of man's realization of brotherhood and friendship proclaimed in the marks of action.